Welcome to Staying Sweet, the podcast. Tune into my weekly podcast to hear me, Alice Bradley, delve deeper into building your brand and enjoying a luxury lifestyle. All while staying sweet, of course. Whether you're looking to level up in business, start something of your own, or balance a more exciting, fulfilling, and healthier lifestyle, each episode will be created especially to inspire and encourage your own success so you can really have it all. Plus, don't miss out on the Staying Sweet specials, a series of exclusive interviews and conversations with Alice Bradley's network of inspiring entrepreneurs and brand owners. Always protect your sweetness, your light is not a weakness. Don't forget, there are new episodes every Monday. For daily content, you can check out my Instagram and you can follow me at alicelucybradley. Stay sweet. Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of Staying Sweet. I'm joined today by the lovely Charlotte.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's so nice to have you on the podcast. I'll be honest, guys, we're not feeling too fresh this morning. Mm-hmm. We actually had an event last night. So, hopefully this podcast makes sense. We are recalling an event that happened last week.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of things have happened since then. And we've been busy doing things, but we are putting this podcast episode together because we really think it's important that we share our findings from the podcast show. I know you guys will be itching to know what it was all about and what the experience was like. I feel like we learnt so much throughout the day, and it was a really nice, lovely day.
Yeah, and I feel like people listening will be like, I'm going to come next year because it was so insightful. We literally had everyone in that room from all the different sides of the industry to do with podcasting, and everyone loved it. Everyone was passionate, and I feel like it just gave us the drive and motivation we needed.
Definitely. And it was just nice to do different things. So whether you were looking for equipment or you hadn't started anything yet, but you wanted to kind of find something to get you into the industry, there was lots to look at, see, do, ranging from handheld mics, easy low-key stuff, to full-on studios and booths and proper setups, which were really inspiring and just something that I am aiming for to have that kind of setup. Imagine.
Oh, I think that's the dream, isn't it? To have your own studio in London.
Oh my gosh.
With your own little cute setup, and then a team behind you that can help you balance everything and make it less stressful.
Definitely. So we thought we would start with maybe the first thing that we did when we arrived. We actually were very lucky to be working with Carver PR, and they invited us down for the day. So I just want to give a short disclaimer that we didn't actually pay for our tickets, but we would have done it anyway. It was just more of a case of, is this something that would work with our brands, our personal brands? And sometimes, guys, you can make it happen for yourself. My podcast hasn't got a crazy amount of reach or whatever, but they were very accommodating in offering us, tickets to attend and share the podcast show. So it was really lovely for them to do that.
Yeah, no, so kind of them. And we really appreciated it because it made the whole journey a little bit smoother,
definitely. And when we first arrived, it's one of those things where you queue in to go into these types of venues. The Business Design Centre is massive, and you're just kind of looking around and you're like, how is this room filled with so many people? And this is the first year that they've done it, and everyone here is passionate about the exact same thing, and it's such a niche, podcasts. There were so many people there, and we arrived at 9 a.m, didn't we?
Yeah,
really early. Yeah. And you're just thinking, oh my gosh, all these people have got up so early to attend. I mean, one of the first things that were on the events, kind of talks and things, did have Louis Theroux, so it possibly was that, encouraging people to attend super early. But oh my gosh, it was so worth it, and we were just kind of in awe, taking it all in, and then we luckily got a seat.
Yeah,
at the Louis Theroux, and it's
Emily Maitlis.
Maitlis. I always pronounce her surname wrong.
I think it's Maitlis. Something like that.
Yeah, the broadcast journalist, and they were talking about interviewing the interviewer, and they were giving an insight into how you can be a better interviewer, how to get the most out of the person that you have on your podcast, or somebody that you're interviewing for the purpose of reporting.
Yeah, I think which was useful for both myself and you, because that's what we do on both of our podcasts. We're trying to be better at interviewing people. I mean, you're one step ahead of me because of your journalism background, but I always want tips on like how to structure questions or challenge people and not be scared of like bringing up like the devil's advocate side of things when you're talking to someone.
Definitely. You want to make them feel relaxed, but you also don't want to let things slide. So Emily was saying some really good points about the perfect balance between like striking when the iron's hot and getting them to answer that really awkward question, but also not like offending them too much, but then also not letting them get away with things. Like say if they're an MP or something, not letting them get away with questions unanswered that people need to know about, the public interest, and having that responsibility as well is insane. Like the thought of all these people watching you and you're asking the big questions. Like she was joking about the Prince Andrew interview, which I totally forgot she did, and like when you think about that was probably one of the biggest royal interviews to date because of what's going on and the secrecy behind the Prince Andrew situation. Like I just think she has had a lot of responsibility, a lot on her shoulders to perform the best possible interview. And like you have to learn how to be, responsive to other people.
It's wonderful, like the skill set that comes behind being an interviewer, I think. And I feel like a lot of people will brush past that and think it's probably easy. It's like, oh, you're just having a conversation with someone, but it is very methodical. And like you said, it's like being proactive and responsive and going with the flow, but also having a plan. It's a bit of everything all in one, and like being able to like figure it out. Yeah,
as well. Like not just allowing yourself to kind of go with the flow too much. Like actually getting to the answers, because somebody's going to be sat and maybe watching an interview and they want to know the answers to the really awkward, harsh questions. I know I do, but yeah, I think there was a lot to learn from her. And then obviously Louis Theroux. I feel like Louis kind of. He was engaging and he was really, really funny, but I don't think I noted down much specific knowledge and expertise from him. I think he's more a character, and I think maybe that's what you can build, the balance of both, like the skills and honing, the actual nitty-gritty behind the interview, and then you've got the personality.
Yeah. And I think he was even very forward about why he is where he is, because he was like, I'm a white middle-aged man, and obviously they are going to be pushed more in the industry and going to have a lot more people backing them, and everyone sort of goes for women included. Like I definitely am like more likely to critique a woman because it's built in society, and I always am like, no, this is what society has made you want to do, like critique how her work is. But I don't ever think, oh, Louis Theroux was a bit shit in this, like, because he's got the character. So he was very open about that, and I think he just basically just got into the industry because people told him to podcast, right? And he didn't have that, I guess, same passion that Emily did.
Yeah, so Emily has a real drive for it, whereas Louis was like, oh yeah, I get people chasing me all the time, which it's hard when those types of people sleep on their own talent and have to have a whole team pushing them to be successful, when there are people that are like, I want this so bad, this is in my blood, this is what I'm meant to do. So it made me see Louis in a new light, not in a bad light, but just I think he is very much a character. And I was having a conversation with another group of journalists actually on a press trip, and we were talking about how Louis Theroux is literally a character and other interviewers are out there like that. So like Alison Hammond, I personally love her. I think she always brings out something to maybe an actor or an actress that she's interviewing. But in the same way, they were arguing as like devil's advocate that perhaps it becomes like about her. The interview becomes about her because it's funny and like she's entertaining versus getting them to answer the questions. But then there are cases where I think she pulls things out of people that other interviewers wouldn't. And these people sit in interviews all day long for things like films. Like the example on the top of my head is Alison Hammond. I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast actually, but Alison Hammond's interview with Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling for the Blade Runner film. I'll have to show it to you, but if you haven't seen it. But it's all about her, and it works because it actually makes Harrison Ford laugh, and it makes this whole like you basically see a new side to him, which I think she does well. But then there might be people watching that going, I came for Harrison Ford, or I'm an Indiana Jones fan, or I'm a Blade Runner fan, or I'm a this, I'm a that. And you're not really getting that as much. So it's striking the balance. Like, to what extent are you watching then the interviewer?
Yeah.
So, like, are you watching Louis, or are you watching the person that he's interviewing and speaking to?
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point. Yeah, really interesting. I think with Emily Maitlis, like, looking at her stuff, like, you really see she's way more laid back. And it is just finding that perfect mix, and also how well are you going to be received by your audience, because you do have to think of things like that in mind, which Alison Hammond probably doesn't. And it's like, oh, am I putting too much attention on myself? So yeah, it's all a very difficult game, I think, being an interviewer, way more than we all think, even us probably right now.
Definitely. And I think it's quite interesting with broadcast news journalism. There's a level of sternness that a woman has to adopt in order to be portrayed as serious and, actually getting to the point. I feel like she was talking about this in the way her questions are positioned and the actual natural flow of the questions, which, again, I've mentioned on another podcast on how to interview. And I think there's a lot to be said from a journalist who can react to a change in, physical behaviour in the person in front of them, but also still follow the flow and the natural progression of the interview, because there's nothing worse than finishing an interview and going, that actor or that person or that MP steered the interview totally away from what I was trying to talk about, because they're trained to do that. It's media training. They're trained to swerve and, dodge questions. So yeah, I felt like it was really insightful,
Yeah, it even just like brought up questions to ourselves, even if we didn't specifically learn things. Or well, obviously we did learn things, but it made me start questioning things a little bit more about like interviewing, and sitting in the back of my brain, like just whirring around.
Definitely. And also Louis mentioned about Ruby Wax, which I think super interesting, because Ruby was actually like one of my favorite. I used to watch her for years, and her interviews are super old, like back from like the 90s. But I would watch how she would interview, and again, she was a bit of a Louis Theroux, and I think the reason that they clash, I don't know whether they're friends again, I don't really know, but she spoke out about how Louis Theroux effectively took her job from her, and she was no longer deemed pretty enough or young enough to be an interviewer in the industry on TV. And then Louis kind of swooped in and not took her like template, but it kind of did, and ran with it, and people are kind of like, oh my gosh, Louis Theroux's so inventive, which in some cases he is, but a woman did do it first. And Ruby Wax is amazing. I highly recommend you sit and watch some of her TV interviews, like with Madonna. And
I've seen the Madonna one.
Oh, I just love it. I think she just, again, she's a bit like Alison Hammond in that she pulls something different out of the person she's interviewing. But it's a hard job. These people are like, either really huge divas or horrible politicians, and that's not to like group people together, but they're usually interviewing quite hard people to talk to.
Yeah.
What do you think you learned from the interviewing like process that maybe you didn't realise was like important?
I think it was more the realisation that I need to cut in more when people are talking, which, because in my normal conversations, I try not to do that. I sometimes get a bit overexcited, and I really try and like rein myself in and like listen, because it's not that I don't want to listen to someone. I like over talk, like when you're talking about like a passion or a subject you really like, and you're like butting in a normal conversation outside of podcasting. But when I'm podcasting, I just sit back a little bit, because I'm obviously very new to this. Like my podcast is very fresh. I just let them talk for ages, and then I'm like, no, I should be like butting in and being like, oh, why do you think that, or what do you think made you feel like that, or what was actually happening at this time that could have affected that, like jumping in. That's what Emily Maitlis was talking about, right? Like cutting in at the right moments. And I think I'm very too laid back sometimes and let people speak for too long without jumping in.
That is a good one, actually. I think as well, when you're doing lots of interviewing so like when I do stuff for magazines, listening and transcribing my interview to then write an article, I'm on the other end, whereas like it annoys me so much when I hear myself going, yeah, or like me saying something. I need to just learn to let that person speak and like get the full quote. Don't put words in their mouth. Don't steer the interview. Let them say what they want to say, and then you will get your, perfect quotes. That's in sort of written journalism, but it's different for every type of media. But podcasting, I think, is supposed to be a bit more rough and ready, a bit more real. And that's, I think, what Emily was saying. She hasn't launched it yet, has she? Or it's just about to launch?
I think so.
But she was saying about how the landscape is evolving, and maybe there will be news broadcasting, on podcasts, which I think I'm seeing a lot of. Sheer Lux do their own sort of news roundup, and there's this natural flow. I feel like it's a new place. It's a different kind of radio.
Yeah, for sure.
Radio that you can pick up whenever you're ready to listen to it.
I like that. That was actually the only talk we went to, right?
Yeah.
But there was a lot of other talks throughout the day.
Many.
Some of them were just purely interviewing big podcasts or podcasters.
Or recording episodes as well.
Oh yeah. That like live recordings.
And then there was we could have done both days, couldn't we?
Yeah. Definitely.
Just to do, because it takes you so long to go around, and you don't have to do every stand, but we were on the premise of, we don't know what we're going to learn from these people. So like every person is valuable in this room. Like we have to make the most of it. So going around to every stand, networking, having a real conversation, not going like, hi, like this is what we do, bye. I think is the best way to kind of get the most out of things. Take all their business cards, take their leaflets, because they've printed them anyway, and you want to trigger your brain. Like you want to remember what you've looked at. And
there were some really good booklets. Like we've brought back guides, like
I know, I've got one right here.
Yeah, things that are really, really useful for if you're wanting to get into podcasting. Like 100%, like they literally have tips in there. Like it's basically a handbook.
Yeah. So there was a stand which, for the life of me, it sounds awful that I can't remember the name of the stand, but they were a stats company. I'll pop it all in the show notes, guys. But this stand were offering free, like unlimited stats on podcast production, listeners, audio, trends for the next like few years. Like this booklet was insane, and the level of effort that's gone into building this report, and they're handing it out for free. Here you go, use it.
Absolutely
use it to grow your podcast. And I know people have paid to get tickets to go, but you are getting so much value out of the little additional extras, the freebies, the free talks. There was what were they called again? Podspike, where they basically like analyze and like critique your podcast. Like how amazing is that?
Giving you some good feedback to improve. When I just felt like everything made us feel like motivated, didn't it? Because we were just ready and raring to record. We wish we recorded there, to be honest, because there was, like we said, soundproof little studios.
Yeah, which they were offering people to use, and they were saying like all the gear is here, like high spec stuff, and they were like, record, do what you need to do. Like I wish I'd brought some guests along. Imagine what we could have done. I think if we'd had 2 days there, 100% I would have done it. Like I would have recorded probably on the next day, and just maybe even pulled some people from the stands to interview. But yeah, you learn from these things, and we're definitely going to be doing both days. Who knows if there's event sooner rather than later. But I've actually got this booklet here, and it says how to get listeners to engage with your podcast today. So it says grow your podcast audience with specific actionable tips, and the booklet is so informative. I think it's branded by a company called Captivate, and it's talking about like what engagement is, how you define it, particularly how you define it in podcasts, because I think it's very different to social media. It's listeners, it's downloads, it's length of time listening, which I guess is similar to YouTube, but getting people to really listen. And what did you learn as well from our lovely friends that we made from the last stand?
Oh, so we have actually had a meeting. We fully scheduled a meeting, which we've had yesterday, with am I allowed to say what it is? Okay, cool. With Progressive Media, and the energy from that stand was just amazing. Like Alice was saying yesterday, that the bond between them all and like the vibes that they gave out were like genuine. They genuinely want to help you and support you and want to see you thrive. Like they're not just in it for the money, and just just for a job to make them money, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just they genuinely want you to progress with your podcast. So we set up a meeting because we were like, yep, we love these people. And they do like a annual fee that helps you
effectively grow and market your podcast.
Yeah.
Which I think is just insane. And it's quite interesting. They were giving so much free advice, and I think I want to share that free advice because it is free. Those bits of information anyway. But one of the big ones, which I did not know, and I wish I knew sooner. So if you are thinking about setting up a podcast of your own, take this advice. Launch with a whole range of episodes. I launched with a trailer and episode 1. And the reason for doing this is you encourage people to binge listen, flick between a few, grow your actual average ranking and, your downloads.
And then it gets pushed on every random people's pages because it will be at the top of the rankings.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how you get the top of your category as well. So like if you're a business podcast like me, there's a high chance you'll be bumped up to the top or much higher. You might come up on like a trending page. Which I thought was fascinating because I did so much research prior. I did about 4 or 5 months of research before I started my podcast, making my art, getting my whole like podcast vibe together. And I did not see that bit of information anywhere.
No. And
it also makes you look like you're well and truly on your way when there's tons of episodes. So I really wish I did that.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that I can't like bulk and add more episodes going forward, but
yeah, it's just something to bear in mind. And also, two other little smaller things. If you're interviewing on Zoom, I didn't realize you can actually split the 2 audios on there. Like you told me how to do it on Zoom. And that's, something I was completely unaware of in the like preferences and sound settings. You can get separate audio clips. So if you're recording with your own mic, you can grab their clip another way, or even just as a backup clip, just to have that there, which I thought was a really useful piece of information. And to improve your discoverability, go for like more keywords in your titles. So rather than being like quoting something from the episode or putting the name of the person you're interviewing, to just put like confidence, religion, sexuality, like like make it like a just memorable keywords that people will go onto the podcast app and search. Do you know what I mean? If someone's like, because they had an example of the back pain podcast. Yeah. And apparently they were spending ages like trying to figure out a name. But he was like, why don't you just call it the back pain podcast? Because if anyone has back pain and they type that in on the app, you're just going to come up with all of your different things. They like speak to physios and all this like random, very niche stuff. But it really made me think I should be very generalized when I write my podcast titles.
Definitely. I think it's easy to get lost in, I have to make this look aesthetic. And I think what is so great about podcasting is it's not about that.
No.
And half the time you're listening and you're not viewing anything. You're clicking on it and then that's it. It's not aesthetic. It's not Instagram. It's not TikTok. It's not YouTube. It's not a, highly polished vlog. Okay, you could put your podcast on YouTube, but it's not about that. It's about good audio, gripping the listener, and being something I think insightful. I really don't. It's weird because I do listen to a couple of podcasts that just have no point to them at all, but I think I'm just in a habit of listening to these people. But I quite like to know that either my listeners or something that I'm listening to has value and I gain something. I would love and I had this vision of somebody listening to my podcast and writing notes, going, oh my gosh, that nugget of information is amazing. And that's what I want to leave people with. And I think hopefully that's going to see growth in what I'm doing. But I think it's really interesting to see how people enjoy podcasts. And again, we were talking about that with progressive media, how people are consuming content.
Yeah. And bringing back to the meeting yesterday, like how did you find that? Did you feel like you either learnt more or you knew a little bit more about the company to sort of
definitely? I think it's so nice because the team are really like hands-on, and it's lovely because it's a range of ages and it's a range of people who have different skill sets, who can bring different things to the table, very like production heavy expertise, and then you've got the marketing and the fun and the flair. Like all those different bits have to come together to create the perfect recipe for a podcast. I think as well, like there's no discrimination. against people who have nothing yet. It's okay, this is amazing, we can work with you from the ground up. And I think unfortunately in the UK there aren't these media companies like there are in America that will literally take your podcast, not off you, but they will go, right, this is where this needs to go in order to be successful. I think it's really lacking in the UK. Hopefully there will be these businesses in the next few years. I'm sure there will be. There will probably be podcast agencies in a matter of years. I'm saying it now because I think it's going to be the next, TikTok and Instagram.
100%.
But yeah, I just think there's so much to learn from these people and companies that are already existing. And by the sounds of things, like they've got a huge list of clients, a huge list of podcasters that are thriving, making a lot of money. And not that it's about the money, but if you've got a mic and if you can do a little bit of editing initially, there you go. This is something you can literally do in your kitchen or on your bed. It is open for everyone, and I think that's what I love about it. Anyone can share their story, anyone can have an opinion.
It's quite accessible, to be honest. Like obviously you've got the payment if you're wanting to buy an editing software, but there are free editing softwares out there.
Gosh, yeah.
And same with the mic. I used to record on my phone in lockdown when me and all my friends in my previous podcast, that's what we used to do. And iPhone quality is not actually that bad, which is quite wild. Like I know if you're wanting to invest in your podcast and you want it to be more of a long-term project, then a microphone is obviously very beneficial, and they're microphones for a reason because they're like way better tech than an iPhone. But it can work for a while. Like I had sponsorships on my old podcast and I was just using my phone, sat in my bedroom on Zoom to my mates. Like that's bizarre. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be flashy from the get-go, and you can build on it.
Definitely. And I think you've got to remember, like, what were those YouTubers doing 10, 15 years ago? What were they recording on?
Exactly. Webcam, probably.
Webcam, yeah. And that's how you grow. You're never going to know unless you just try. So I think that I would share that advice. I think there was a lot of that at the podcast show. A lot of like, okay, this is where you're at right now. Okay, this is what we can do to get you to progress. It's not, going somewhere and you don't have a production team behind you. Oh, we can't work with you. It was none of that. It was very relaxed. It was very open. There were so many different brands offering like crazy things, like crazy bits of tech, and they're great, but you don't have to do it that way. Although we did see some really exciting bits of tech, didn't we? What was it, the No Mono or
Namona?
I can't remember.
I thought
I
it
will
was
put that in the not the suggested. I'm so used to saying that with my YouTube channel. I will pop it in my show notes, guys. Can you tell I literally record too many things? But yeah, I'll pop it in the show notes. It's basically like this, almost like this pod thing that has these small microphones that can detach. I think, was there 4?
4, and you can just clip it onto your clothing like you would in like a proper studio, if you're being interviewed or, anything like that. It was very like professional. Definitely.
And I think those types of kit, like, okay, maybe they're a bit like, what's the word? Like gimmicky.
Yeah.
But it might be something for you, and it might actually be a motivator for you to get a good interview and play around with the technology. I think we're going to see a lot of tech coming out in the next few years.
Yeah, it seemed like very innovative though, because it was so compact, which it would be ideal for you, especially because you like travel to people's places for interviewing, which is so useful, and I probably will in the future too. So it's nice that it's in like a little kit. I think it even had like a handle on the top or something that you could attach, and then it comes with, you can get the editing software as well, and then it also picks up the background sound as well, so you can like fully eliminate that or keep it there if you want it to be a bit more like, I guess, not homely, but a bit more natural, I guess. Sometimes people like a bit of ambience in the background.
Yeah, ambient noise, which is quite interesting. But yeah, I feel like we learned so much. There were also some really fun things. So actually when we were heading out to leave, typical, this always happens, we noticed that Spotify's sister brand, Anchor FM, which is their podcasting platform, were downstairs on the main like entrance, and we just literally walked past them and didn't even notice, which was so silly.
I think we were very overwhelmed not overwhelmed when we went in, but like taking in the atmosphere.
Yeah, there was so much to look at, and I think the day just flew. And then by the time we were sort of walking out, we were like, oh, there's some tote bags over there. Like, what's that about? Should we grab one? And then we approached it, and you could put your literal podcast art on the tote bags, which for me, I was like, that is so freaking cool, because
Such a fab idea.
not only is it like personalized to you, but it's branding them. You know, every tote bag had Spotify written on it. Genius.
Yeah. In all aspects, because you're now a walking promotion for your podcast. It's nice to have something that's like sentimental from the event as well, because it will remind you of the event, and it has your podcast. It's just what a wonderful idea.
Brilliant
Spotify.
idea. Like, I think events like that can pull off something really personalized are the events that stand out, because it's a memorable experience. Like, it was so exciting. We were waiting for it to like work, and obviously these amazing people doing the actual physical printing in the back room. I was like, oh my god, they're literally printing so many people's podcasts.
Yeah, so accommodating as well, because they'd actually closed it off, and we were like, we're not coming here tomorrow, we won't be able to get one. And he was like, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, and he did. He pulled through, and now we have branded tote bags, which is so nice, because I'm already thinking about rebranding my podcast. So I want that kind of moment, you know, in a memory and in a physical piece of something, like merch, I guess. So it's going to be really nice to look back on. And I think you do progress in these things. You're never really going to stay the same. You're going to evolve your work and your flow. But yeah, I thought it was a really nice like moment. Encapsulated? What's the word? Encapsulated. I feel like that's not the right word.
Encompass? No.
I can't think.
No.
Yeah, can you tell, guys, that we're looking at each other like kind of like
dead.
half dead, because we had a very messy night out last night.
We did.
But yeah, we just wanted to share some insight into what we learned, what we saw. Every single brand that we came across and that I have information for, I will link in the show notes. So in case there's something that struck your interest or was something that, you know, might work for you, it will be there available. So I will do that. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for coming on the pod.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Hopefully I've said something interesting in that
I think
episode.
we have. But yeah, we will definitely be back again, I'm sure, for another episode together. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Staying Sweet, the podcast. If you enjoyed listening, please do leave a review, and I will catch you next week for a new episode. Stay sweet.